Hello, Professor Chen. Thank you very much for this opportunity. It is an honor for me to have this opportunity to dialogue with you and discuss some of the important topics for the relationship between Portugal, the European Union, and China.
Hello, Bernard. It's my great pleasure to meet you here again online and wish we can have better understandings on these things and finding out what should be the proper directions and ways to improve our bilateral triangle relationships, which is very maybe the one of the most important relationships in today's world.
My feeling is positive because I think it's difficult to be worse than it was before. So it's a new start, it's a new beginning, it's a new opportunity. I think we should take it from there because everything is starting from zero. We know that both President Trump and President Xi Jinping already talked on the phone. We know that the vice from China is also attending the ceremony today. So I think it is positive. We should put our hope, but of course, I would like to know what the professor has to say about this.
Yes, I think that I think we can have a cautious, optimistic for the future development of our two countries. It's quite clear, and we already see some positive signals. It seems that at least rhetorically, Trump said that he wants to have a better relationship with China, and he said that he has better understanding on these things, and he believed that if China and the United States can cooperate, we can solve a lot of things. But of course, we know that one of the maybe the only certainties from Trump's side is the uncertainty. These guys change his word very rapidly, and maybe the next moment he will have a new ideas on these bilateral relationships or on some big issues. From China's side, I think we have the reason to keep a cautious optimistic because China's side make quite good preparations for Trump's second terms in White House. Our top leaders already make decisions to keep and ensure that he has a personal, direct dialogue and communication channels with Trump, so that these two guys they can directly change their personal ideas and informations. And we know such kind of good relationship between these two top leaders will make some help to our bilateral relationships. And the second, de facto, I think that just as Bernard mentioned, actually we nearly starting from zero, which means that the Biden administrations do lots of things that will do damage to bilateral relationships. Even if he only have no more than 1 month in the White House, he released a lot of stupid policies. And but on the other side, can say that we have nothing to lose. We nearly can begin our bilateral relationship in Trump's new terms. Nearly from white papers, we can try to push forward any possible positive progress, maybe as tiny as possible. And during the dialogue, I mean the call, Trump released a lot of lists from the fentanyls to the maybe the governance of new technologies and how to ensure the new balance between our trade. Maybe it's not new questions, but at least he already showed that he has kind of willingness to push forward the cooperations. From China's side, you will find that one of the most important positive element to ensure the stability and the constructive development of this bilateral relationship is China already formed a quite stable guiding principles. We name it the three guiding principles to this U.S. and China relationship, including the mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and try to ensure the joint development and the joint prosperities between our two countries and to the world. I think we have the reason to keep a very cautious but a little bit optimistic attitude to wish and to respect that in this new 4 years when Trump in the White House, we can have in certain aspect better relationships if possible.
Yes, Professor, I agree with you, and thank you for bringing in the cautious factor. Of course, we should be cautious. And what makes me optimistic, it's also the fact that Trump is very pragmatic, and he knows there is a lot of common ground as well. And there are a lot of challenges, like you just mentioned now. There are also common ground within the three principles that were mentioned. There is a lot of common ground. And because Trump is so pragmatic and because he understands that if China and the US are aligned, he will have more to win with that, including in eventually other geographies, eventually other technological areas. He knows that if he cooperates, that the US and China together can do a lot, not only for themselves, but they can also do a lot for the world as a whole. And I'm talking now about pollution wars, and there's a lot of things that can be done and can be achieved together. And I'm so hopeful. Of course, I cannot predict the future, but I'm really hopeful that this pragmatic view and the independence of President Trump from other thoughts that we know that prevail a lot in the American administration, that this independence of thinking can prevail. I'm very hopeful, and of course, but I understand we need to. Of course, we need to be cautious and we need to think about all the possible scenarios. But it's great that China, on the other end, is so stable on the view that they have of the international relations, on the three principles, and not only, because it brings a lot of stability. However, I still remain optimistic.
Yeah, I agree with you that Trump's pragmatic attitude and his style like a businessman, which means focusing on the real and objective interests rather than those a little bit ideological issues, will helping us to keep optimistic to the future development. But on the other side, we have to understand we have some kind of, I can name it, structural obstacles inside the United States. Trump, his personality may be focusing on this practical attitude and focusing on the real interest and the common ground between China and the United States. But his team, including some unstable hawkish peoples, which may be focusing more on these ideological or so-called traditional or classical geopolitical attitude or views toward China, which will treat China more as a kind of so-called adversaries or those challengers to U.S. hegemonies rather than practical peer-to-peer cooperation strategic partners. And one more thing is I feel a little bit concerned from the obstacles or challenges that will raised from the US Congress, because in his structures, the Congress and the White House, they need to check and balance with each other. And since the first term, it's more and more signals that the US Congress want to have more powers or try to keep the dominant positions to deal with the Sino-US strategic relationships by taking advantages of Congress power by making laws. If they passing some laws, it will make difficult for the US president to passing by these laws. While at the same time, so I don't think that though Trump has more influentials and had more personal powers comparing to the first terms inside the GOP, I mean the Republican Party itself. But there are some politicians, including even the Congress spokesman Johnson and the senators represented by Tom Cotton, these guys, they have quite different attitude and views on China issues comparing to Trump. So maybe in future we will have such kind of not new but quite classical scenarios on certain issues. Trump and Chinese government, our top leaders, they can dialogue and cooperate during their summit and got some agreement. United States providing some promise that he will do something. constructive, cooperative to push forward these bilateral relationships. But he cannot deliver his promise. When he go back to the United States, the U.S. Congress will stop him from deliver or transfer his promise from paper to the real practice, and that will add more not only the uncertainties to bilateral relationships, but will do damage to this bilateral trust. That's a little bit regret that in quite a long time, it's not the first time that Sino-US relationship face such kind of challenges. Even in the 1990s, we always say that when US president go to China, they can have good dialogue, make good statement, but when the president go back to the United States, they will passing by some new laws or new policy files, which moving to the just opposite positions, the directions, which input more negative elements to these bilateral relationships. I feel just like you mentioned, I feel also a little bit cautious, optimistic attitude on these Sino-US relationships in his second terms. But just to wait and see. Wish we can got more better signals, more better real actions in these relations in the future times.
Yes, and we've just had one signal that comes on the right direction with the TikTok announcement that they will issue an executive order to go back in this decision that was effective yesterday. So I think that's a positive one. And then going back to what you say, yes, I agree. There are many obstacles. But then again, also important to remind that the personality of the leaders in each circumstance are very, very important. Their own thought, to eventually to fight and change what is pure ideology, because it's not something that comes out of the rational. It's something that comes out of deep-seated emotions that do not have an adherence to the reality and to the interest of the United States, actually, or Europe, if we go to Europe and talk about Europe afterwards. And I think Trump has the conditions to do that. Just like, and I like to remind this case because I always like to talk about this case, just like John F. Kennedy in 1963, when he made the peace speech, and he completely changed the relationship and the development of nuclear tests between in the whole world, but first with that speech between USA and Russia. And I believe that Trump has the potential to do something as powerful as this. And I'm very hopeful, of course, but I totally agree with you. Lots of challenges, and so I can only cross my fingers.
Yeah, I also need cross my fingers. About this TikTok, I can add you more information on these things. First, yes, you can say that when Trump say that he has some ideas to resolve these problems, and after nearly less than 1 day shutdown, the TikTok reopen in the United States is kind of good positive signals on one side. But on the other side, TikTok is also a very classic case because first, Trump is the first guy who raised this threat that otherwise you will sort it out or I will ban you in the United States when he in first term in the White House. Of course, nowadays he has different ideas. He find that definitely TikTok is a good tools for him, and also you can say it's a good tools for the GOP to become more influential inside U.S. young generations. But when you're talking about more detailed, which can be delivered technical solutions for these questions, it's a lot of challenges. Actually, if you read what TikTok already done in the United States, try to fulfill the requirement raised by United States, they already fit for these so-called capital structures of the companies. Actually, there's more than 50% of capital structure come from United States, not from China. But of course, the real challenge is based on the governance structures. Red line of the TikTok is quite clear. It will never be sold, which means it will never lose its control of these companies. it will be mission impossible, which did not quite complicated to understand because according to the basic commercial rules, the founding fathers of these companies, definitely it's his own right properties. You cannot just label him with so-called national threat and coercive him to sold it out to other peoples. That's not the proper way to doing business. But whether US can go back to these uh, common ground or common sense based business problem or principles to solve these issues. Another more tougher challenges come from the US politics because the law, which providing a law basement inside the United States to ask either TikTok will be sold out or banned inside the United States already being passed. It become a law. The Trump did not have the power to suspend this law or to just cancel it. It may send some administrative files to make some balance, but it's quite complicated because the spokesman Johnson already say that he believed that their understanding Trump's decision is based on the assumption that finally TikTok will be sold to a new American buyers. And in that preconditions, maybe they could allow these companies to have more times to deal with this purchasement. But that's not the ideas come from the
Mhm.
TikTok. And also more maybe a worse information comes from Senator Cotton. He and his colleagues already make a joint statement in the last Sunday in the United States. It say that there's no space for so-called suspend or stop deployment deliver for this law according to the text files of this law passing by the Congress and signed by Biden and the president. So that's a very tough challenges. And
Mhm.
also, last, of course, not the least, when Trump say that I have a new ideas, we want to save this TikTok, and we will have ventures talking about the capital structures. He did not make any per communication with TikTok.
Mhm.
Even he did not make a very successful inside communications with his peoples inside the US Congress. So we still need to wait and see. But I agree with you that this TikTok can be a very good starting point or starting case to find out whether this guy has enough capacities and the willingness to input more constructive elements in this Sino and US relationship in his new terms. And we just continue, we'll keep observing the latest development of this case.
Very well. Yes, I agree. That I agree particularly with the fact that this case can be very relevant to understand what is effective power to manage the Congress and all the complexities of the decision-making process in the US. We worry about that because tariffs and protectionism are terrible for the well-being of people in general. So hopefully there will be now a new assessment. We're not in the electoral period anymore. Now is becoming today is becoming effective is power. So let's see what is going to do now. This has been very useful because it has shown to the local European leaders that they should manage the relationship they have with the rest of the world and not be so dependent of one country. This is about what has been claimed before in the relationship between Europe and China, actually, to manage the risk. It's the risking is a basic management tool. It's managing risk. You call it the risking to put a negative factor in the word, but it's actually managing the risk. You should be neutral in your economic relationship. and you should have a good relationship with all sides because as we can see, things keep changing, and the circumstances are different every 4 or 5 years, sometimes even less than that. So we should manage the relationship. We should also consider and respect the past relationship when it's good and beneficial, especially, which is the case between Europe and China. So I think this was a wake-up call for the European leaders that they should manage more carefully the relationship, put aside the non-rational ideology, and bring aboard a more rational approach, which puts the interest of the people first. This is the most important. The politicians, they are the leaders. They have a very specific mandate, which is the well-being of the people. So if we have a good relationship with all countries, the US, China, and every country in the world, this can only bring us more benefit. It will bring us more space to talk, to discuss, and to make our interest be more easily achieved than if we keep talking about either ideology or if we keep forgetting the interest of the people. If we have more difficulty to do business with the US, of course, that the European politicians will have more room, even from the public opinion, because that's the most important for the European leaders is the public opinion. Then they will have more room to work more with China. Just recently, the US has issued some limitations to the trade of ships with some European countries, including Portugal. So you can imagine the feeling of the Portuguese people with this kind of measure is taken, by a friendly. Supposedly, it's a friendly country. We are all part of NATO. We are very aligned. We are allies, and then it comes like this. So, of course, these are all wake up calls. I think it's important. The politicians need to understand that they have to defend our interests more than anything, and our interest is the well-being of our people.
I think that it's very interesting questions to understand or to make some imaginations of possible scenarios between US, China, and the European Unions in Trump's second teams. I agree with you that these tariff things, the European unions need to focusing on its own interest because the rising Trump's preference of the tariff and the so-called the MAGA Make America Great Again or put America at the first positions. De facto speaking, it's nothing more than a new terms for the quite traditional or even classic trade protectionisms in certain aspects. And we all know that such kind of practices will not solve the problems, but I think that will be the first challenges both China and the European unions will face in the second Trump's team. This guy, he just believe in himself, and it will be difficult for him to upgrade his uh, knowledge systems about how to doing business, how to doing international relationships in the year 2025 or in the 21st centuries. This guy, his understanding of business of this international relationship, you can find that he just lived in the world in the maybe late 18th or late 19th centuries, in, in which that the countries they doing business, they making their own factory and the productions in a completely different ways. I think that will be a very tough challenges because it means we need to sometimes we'll feel that we need to input too much times to persuade these guys. But these guys it may be mission impossible to persuade. You need to conflict with them in certain ways to such kind of conflict will become a wake-up call for these guys to call back his pragmatic attitude on this or to take a more practical attitude to deal with these complex problems. The first. And the second, I feel a little bit concerned about domestic political elements or structures inside the European Unions. I mean, all those member state of the EU. Because from China's perspective, I highly agree with Bernard say that maybe the first priority of European countries, they need to put aside those irrational ideological elements aside, uh, to separate it with from the more practical, objective core interest of European countries, so that we can deal this difference or problems in practical ways. We can separate different things. Nowadays, I think that we can also keep cautious optimistic because we find some signals. Those big companies, they transfer their industry capacities from European unions to China so that they can continue their productions here. But on the other side, Bernardo, you said that you are in Brazil, that it will be difficult to find those positive improvement of Brazil's. They still also focusing too much on this. In my personal opinions, is quite irrational ideological elements dominated their understanding on these bilateral and multilateral relationships between China, European Unions, and the United States. It seems that these guys, or at least some of these European Union's top politicians, they would will to continue their unbalanced, even unilateral driven preference toward the United States and accept every requirement raised by the United States, no matter how improper it is, how sometimes ridiculous it is. They will just accept these ideas, make some very soft blame or complain about this irrational or ridiculous requirement, and then just keep their strategy and policy unchanged. That make Chinese people feel confused, sometimes feel just deep regret because it just wastes not only times but also opportunities and the trust we used to have toward the European peoples and the countries. I think that should be a problems. Do you have any ideas how to solve these issues? And or can you help us to finding out more positive signals or elements from your inside the European unions or inside countries like Portuguese, so that we can become more confident to our future relationships?
Yeah, my first advice would be optimistic more than an advice is a request. Please be please be patient.
Mhm.
Then besides some parts of the politicians, not leaders, but politicians, it's very much ideological, as you say, and it's very good for the media. So it's easy talk, to not be nice to China. Then there is also, in my opinion, of course, some blindness regarding following the allies of what they consider the allies. There is some blindness in that because the blindness should be only put on following the interest of the European people. And as to besides a little bit of patience, I think it is very important the diplomatic work, the work of the lobbying, namely here in Brussels, because nowadays more than 50% of all the laws that are made in my own country, Portugal, they actually come from Brussels. So we don't do anything. And they don't come from the parliament, they come from the commission, which is not even elected. So and this is the internal problem we have, and we have different views about this. In my opinion, it should not be like that. It should be made by the parliament, not the commission. But what you can do to help, besides being a little bit patient, is a lot of communication, a lot of diplomacy, and a lot of lobbying. because I believe that if we explain rationally the position of China, and if we keep talking, keep leaving the door open to find opportunities, to bring mutual benefits, to go back and try to do the investment agreement between Europe and China again, all of this. And then again, it's also about the leadership. Nowadays, we have in Europe the president of the council is a Portuguese, Antonio Costa. He just took over this position. He has been he was an important person in a phase of huge Chinese investment in Portugal when Portugal went through a very difficult moment. We almost bankrupt actually after the financial crisis of 2008. At the time, we've had the Troika, which was the European Commission, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Bank, Central Bank. They lent us 76 billion euros in exchange of a very hard program, including privatizing several companies. These companies went to international bids, and the Chinese companies were the ones that valued most our companies that were being privatized. So, and we also had other types of help from China at the time. And so Antonio Costa has experienced all of that. So he knows the benefits of a win-win relationship. On the other end, he was also the prime minister at the time that Huawei was banned, not banned, but it was restricted in Portugal, was very restricted and still is. So at the time, probably eyeing this position in Europe, he already changed his position, but he knows, and I think he's a diplomat. So I think he's a good negotiator, and he will probably be a good bridge here in Europe, a good person for the Chinese authorities to negotiate with, and to show their arguments, their rational arguments. So I think it's that we need to keep the dialogue open, and yeah, that's what we can do right now.
Thank you, Brian. I think that your introduce make me have more reasons to feel optimistic for our future relationships, and wish that these rational politicians they can have become more louder voice and make people have better understanding what's the real interest of European unions, and then try best to keep control those negative elements of these irrational ideological issues, which will already damage this U.S. and China, European Union and China relationship too much.
First of all, I have no insights as to if they're going to issue more sanctions. Secondly, the reasons are related to what we've just discussed. It's to follow the advice of the strategic allies that Europe believes at this moment. Not Europe, but some people in Europe believe at this moment it is in the best interest of Europe. In my opinion, which is just my opinion, this is a misrepresentation of our interest, of course. And it's what we have been saying. I mean, if you put the interest of the people first, there's no way you're going to you're going to sanction companies. It's not working. We know the sanctions are not working, are not useful. We need to put the dialogue always first. We need to put the diplomacy, and we have opportunities when we have new leaders, and so I think now is an opportunity to recalibrate all of this international mess that we're living currently. And yeah, I'm also crossing my fingers for that.
Yeah, it's also a big concern or sometimes confuse or even more angers from China's side. I think that you must read the Deputy of China in the United Nations, Mr. Geng Shuang. He made his speech when he faced those stupid misinformation raised by the US deputy representatives in the European Union Security Council's dialogue on these Ukraine issues. And Geng Shuang sending a very clear signal. He said that if China really did something, which means providing the aid to Russian side on this conflict, that is front line of the conflict will be not today's situation. From China's side, his speech make a great shock because it's the very first time for China's official representatives to make this quite clear. I think that for Chinese peoples, which has a better understanding of China's capacities of productions, finding that Geng Shuang make these things very clear. Its implication is quite simple. If China did aid Russia on this military elements, technologies, or capacities, or productions, as European unions or United States believe China did it, we can change these things. Maybe all the issues already been over because China has huge capacities, but China don't. We don't provide these things. But from China's side is such kind of sections, I mean that European unions is the first time add China's entity in those lists, it will trigger a very negative feedback from China's side. The first, it providing China one more evidence that European Union, especially those politicians in the Brussels, they cannot be trusted. They don't have enough capacities to finding out what the real world is, what China did or China did not. They just live in the world mainly based on their imaginations. Because sometimes I think that I can say personally, I believe such kind of accusation of China's companies or China's aid to so-called Russia is nothing more than an excuse or to finding out a so-called reasonable reasons for their failure policy and strategies in these Russia and Ukraine issues. The first. And the second, we have to understand nowadays, even inside of Chinese peoples, we have a full access of all those new media's platforms, new media's tools based on this ICT. We have these social medias and this fragment of this information that European unions add China's entity to those lists and launch sanction to these Chinese entities for something they didn't do it. It's providing a very negative influential for those normal netizens inside China. These peoples are very, very active on these things, and their attitude will create a kind of atmosphere which is negative for our future development between to our side because the government not easy for Chinese government to persuade its peoples. We still need to development of our relationship toward the European Union, toward EU countries, even though they did this such kind of stupid things to do damage to our national interest. I hope that, Brad, do you think it's possible for European politicians to change their policy or attitude on these things, especially if we consider such kind of scenarios. What will happen if Trump really makes some change of United States policy toward this Ukraine and the Russia conflict when he really entered the White House? If he lower it down or make some limitations, restrictions for providing aid to Ukraine, not terminate it, but just level it down dramatically. Is it possible for European unions to change its policies, or especially is it possible, or to how to make it possible for European unions to remove those Chinese entities from that list? Is it possible, or if possible, how to do it?
Yeah, it is possible, but it is through the democratic process. What I mean is, it's not possible with the people that are there now, because they would lose a lot of face. But this happens naturally in Europe because we keep having elections, people keep changing. We know we have voices saying with different opinions. So as to the people that are now, the leaders that are now, it is possible to improve a little bit, but it is not possible to reverse it totally. That is not possible with these people. But to improve, yes. And to improve, we go back to what we discussed a while ago. It is a lot about communication, about talking, about showing evidence. And this is why it's so important to keep all these diplomatic channels open, to keep the social media also with smart people talking, which fortunately we have a lot. And a lot of people, you see a lot of people smarting up and seeing what's really going on, but still minority in what concerns the relationship with China, because most people, and I would say maybe 90% of the politicians here in Brussels, maybe they never went to China, or if they did, they went for a trip, they don't know. So they just they follow whatever the party they belong to is deciding that is the best for the party. Of course, there is hope. I think yes, I know I'm maybe over optimistic, but of course I'm hopeful. Also, I think there is a way which is to improve the current feeling of the people, which is negative towards China, we have to say. Not only these politicians, but also the image they pass down, of course. We have to keep opening more channels and providing evidence, discussing, inviting, try to persuade also to go to do these high level meetings with the Chinese government. This year is the 50th anniversary of the European Union and China diplomatic relationship. This is also a great opportunity to showcase the benefits of a win-win relationship between the two blocks. So we need to use every opportunity to do what we believe it is right by showing evidence, by discussing. Because if we discuss with ideas, we will demonstrate what's right. We might not reach out to everyone, because some people have this deep-seated emotions and ideology that is difficult to persuade them otherwise. But that's okay. I mean, we cannot persuade everyone. They're free to have their own opinion, no matter how stupid we might believe it is. They might think the same about what we think. So it's okay. As long as we can keep discussing and persuade some, I think that's good enough.
Yes, thank you. I think, Bernardo, you're providing us lots of optimistic driving force and make me believe that if there will be more people like you inside Brazil and the European countries, we definitely have more enough reasons to keep optimistic attitude to our future relationships. Just you mentioned, this year is the anniversaries that our two sides build our relationships. It's very important for us. I think comparing to United States, China and the European Unions, maybe at least we should, according to my personal ideas, have far more better and common understandings on how to ensure the sustainable development of our own countries in a more general ways. And also, I think during our relationship development in the past several decades, we already has enough experience how to ensure or to guard these so-called win-win strategic scenarios. And if we can exchange more effectively those truth informations, we can keep our communications to take a more practical attitude to deal with all these disputes and try our best to enhance the development of our joint ventures in all possible fields, which make us got benefits not only to level up our living standard, to improve our economies, but to make our normal peoples to have the opportunities, have better understanding, have this face-to-face communication and exchange to control or to degrade those misinformation or disinformations, which providing us negative or inaccurate understanding toward each others. It will highly possible for us, and it's very necessary for us to ensure our future development of our bilateral relationships in the general ways. I wish that your ideas will come true in this year and wish to have more better and constructive signals from both sides.
Yes, I hope so. I agree with you. Thank you.
Mhm.
In a way, that already happens at the European Commission level. There is the general push is for more power to the European Union. Right now, there is a huge push for that. But and this is at a political, at a leadership level. This is what they're pushing for. But at the people, I do not feel this is accompanied by the people. And I can tell you from my personal point of view that the interest of my country is different many times from the interest of the European Union or the European Commission, better said. So this will be this for sure that the European Commission will push for that. We see some national parties in each country of the European Union also pushing for this agenda. Personally, I'm totally against that. I think we should keep our autonomy and our decision-making process more inside borders, and the leaders should be closer to the people, not so far away. Um, but um, but we will see. I cannot divisions. Yeah, there will be divisions in what regards this tendency. If it is going to go one way or the other way, I am totally in favor of the European Union. I think it brings a lot of power and to defend our interests, the interest of the Portuguese people to be part of the European Union. And but my main focus is, of course, the interest of the Portuguese people, and the interest of the European people is my second interest. If you want to put it in a hierarchy.
I think that Bernardo, you're providing us a very important and helpful insight from your side to have better understanding of the development of these European unions and our relationships with EU. And my point, I want to add one last point to your point of views. I think maybe it's really appropriate time for rational peoples, either businessmen or politicians, those rational peoples as rational as yours, maybe you need to input more energies and efforts to improve our
Mhm.
bilateral relationships. It's a proper time to rethink that. Just you mentioned, maybe it's a time to think whether it's properly to just let those peoples inside the European EU commissions to make total decisions, especially if these guys make wrong decisions, their interest not fit for either the single member state of European unions or the interest of European unions in the more general ways. How to stop it? How to make some leverages to make a proper balancing of this process? Maybe that could be one kind of very important future development of EU or to building the structures and the decision-making process more properly in the future times. And also, I wish that in futures we are not seeing only those single companies, single member state, or single politicians to voice out uh, the truth that European unions and European Commissions should represent the real interest of European peoples and European countries, not on should not only working for those members, their personal ideas or personal understandings of European interest in the wrong ways. That will be a very tough challenges, but I sincerely wish that in futures you guys can finding proper solutions. And I think it will be very important for both of us, not only both of us, important for China, important for European Unions, but also very important for the world because you guys are really a cluster of developed countries which take a very special positions in today's world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.